Hello and welcome back. And do you guys remember this? This is the Slate 7. This is possibly, maybe the world's first Wi-Fi 7 travel router, arriving with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet WAN and LAN. Also has USB support there, support of a myriad of different applications and multiple VPNs there. This is designed for users that travel quite a lot and you're making your way through streets, through railway stations, through airports and more, where you are reliant on public Wi-Fi and you're slightly worried about who can see your data, who can see your IP, and ultimately the security when you're using those public Wi-Fi services. That's where this comes in, when you're utilizing your laptop on the go, your phone on the go, your tablet, your whatever. So let's crack on and talk about everything we like about the Slate 7 and everything we don't like, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll know whether this thing deserves your data. So I've been using the Slate now for the better part of a week, and I'll say for the most part I'm really impressed. The lack of 6 gigahertz on there is definitely going to be a heel, but as you'll see later on during our performance testing, I'm not convinced this device would have been able to fully saturate more than the existing 2.4 and 5 gigahertz inside there. One of the things I didn't really allude to in that introduction there is to do with just how affordable 2.5 GBE and Wi-Fi 7 has become. Notwithstanding this device, again, that you can get for as low right now as $96. They're doing like a whole early bird thing where it goes from $96 to $102, eventually hitting that $149 price point there when it officially launches. I will say that other accoutrements in upgrading your portable setup have actually become similarly very affordable. Things like 5 gigabit Ethernet adapters like this one, which provide USB to 5 gig Ethernet immediately for about $20 to $30. The same goes for Wi-Fi 7, of course, where now you can pick up 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi 7 adapters for USB for as little as $20 to $30 there. So there is definitely a market for growing affordable Wi-Fi 7 solutions, but of course this is predominantly targeting portable Wi-Fi use and third-party public Wi-Fi use and keeping it as secure as possible. Now, the internal CPU and memory, 3 gig of DDR4 memory combined with that quad-core ARM Qualcomm CPU inside will keep things moving quite substantially. And that data is going to be moving. The dual band on there, so again, that lack of 6 gigahertz there, you do have a 2.4 gigahertz and a 5 gigahertz connection at Wi-Fi 7, supplying 688 megabits per second on the 2.4 gigahertz and up to a nice 2.8 gigabits per second on the Wi-Fi 7 5 gigahertz connection there. When we had this device connected to our Wi-Fi 7 USB adapter, something you'll see more later on in the video, we're able to reach that 2.8 gigabit network bandwidth connection between these two devices, which again you'll see later with some file transfers and iPerf. So the connection speed is there, and thanks to Wi-Fi 7 support of MLO multi-link output, it means that you can have simultaneous banded connections between singular clients and this device, trunking a lot of those connections together. Combine that with the fact that this device also has that USB output that allows you to add USB drives as well as mobile phones for tethering, and you do have a lot of flexibility in what this device can do. Supporting up to 120 individual Wi-Fi devices managed by that software inside. Again, it is utilizing existing OpenWRT software forks, but again, you've got support of applications and add-ons. Again, in the App Center, we'll talk about later on. There's also 2 different methodologies towards configuring this device. There's a mobile application that we're going to talk about in another video soon regarding VPNs and Nord, but with regards to the desktop experience, you can configure this just like you can any other router, and the advanced settings via semi-command line are particularly deep, by the way, something we'll touch on towards the end of the video. But it is the connections with 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports. Both of them, by the way, can be used for both LAN and WAN. Complete customization and choice on your own part, along with the USB. As mentioned, you can connect tethering or mobile to add another failover internet connection if you choose, and that power delivery there. We had this device running with connections happening on iPerf and with simultaneous connections on Wi-Fi to a mobile phone and a desktop, and physical WAN input and physical LAN input, and we saw the base power consumption of this device in idle sitting around 6 to 7 watts, only go to about 8.1 to 8.2 watts. It spiked up to there. So again, that leaves this device running for a very long time on a very low metered power connection. Indeed, yes, there's no internal SIM card slot, and yes, there's no internal battery. For that, you want to look at the Pulley AX. However, this device, being portable as all hell, can be powered from your desktop, can be powered from a tablet or mobile phone. That power delivery is low enough that I think you could power this on practically anything with a USB port. And of course, there's the physical button that you can assign to individual VPN or general tunneling protocols that you can install via the software, can be enabled or disabled on the fly physically, with a lot of the features and services being manageable via that LCD panel there on the front. That's right. This device here has, unlike a lot of the other solutions from GL.iNet, this has a physical touchscreen that allows you to see network performance monitoring, see CPU, memory, and flash storage monitoring with the internal storage module as well. Alongside that, allowing you to disable or enable a lot of those VPN services we mentioned, as well as sharing the individual Wi-Fi connections and the guest connection, all of which manage from there. It's nowhere near as extensive as the desktop or the mobile, but it still gives you a modicum of control on this device that was absent in previous generations. And of course, it's portable as all hell. This is a pocket-sized network gateway, once again acting as that VPN-linked tunnel for all of your devices you're taking on the go, that you don't want to have to individually collect them all to a third-party public Wi-Fi. You can funnel them all to this one Wi-Fi point and make sure that is as secure as possible. But for many, this device claiming to be Wi-Fi 7 isn't going to hold a lot of water, because as mentioned earlier on, the lack of the 6 GHz support on this is a killer for some. Why is that? Well, 6 GHz in tune with Wi-Fi 7, because the two things, by the way, are not the same thing. They are barely living in the same Venn diagram. The 6 GHz spectrum allows a greater sandbox area to play with for your individual connected devices. Remember I mentioned 150 devices supported on this? Well, MLO, a feature of multi-link output I touched on earlier on, allowing multiple connections from one physical client device to the router, and need a little more space to take advantage of the individual band locked packets there. And this device not supporting 6 GHz means there is less room on the frequencies that it does support to add all of those devices. Also, it doesn't go higher than 160 megahertz packets because of that. So you can't take advantage of two major benefits of Wi-Fi 7, the 6 gigahertz spectrum and 320 megahertz packets. You've still got some room to play with across the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz spectrum, but just do keep that in mind. If you do have an in-house Wi-Fi 7 router right now for your client devices that does have 6 gigahertz, some of those performance highs are not going to be possible on this. But realistically, we've got to talk more about the software than the hardware on this, because the whole point of a travel router is that once you've set it up right, you should never have to go into that software again, and this should just do its job. So let's head over to the web browser and go through the GL.iNet software that the Slate 7 arrives with. So looking into the desktop panel here via the web browser on this laptop, we've got an active 2.5 gig connection and an active Wi-Fi 7 connection. We're going in with this and we're going to go through the configuration of the Slate 7. I will say, if you've already seen the configuration or used the Beryl, this is largely the same. It's just a scale up of what's on offer. Immediately, it's worth highlighting that you can see I've got the 3 active WAN clients there. Accessing the device there, going through, taking advantage of all the connected internet services. Alongside that, we've got a physical LAN connection as well, going into a wider network switch. Now, again, we've got the failover, we've got standard Ethernet. We could turn the second Ethernet port, if we want to, directly into a WAN. We've got the WAN, we've got the LAN, we've got the option to do a repeat of existing Wi-Fi services around us, again, first or third party. You can also tether a mobile phone device or repeat using a USB cellular dongle there. So you've got the option to do quite a lot to play with. And a quick overview of the hardware that's on use right now. As you can see, while I've got 3 Wi-Fi 7 connections and a 2.5 gig physical Ethernet going into the device, we're able to see there CPU utilization there pretty darn low. Again, not too much going on there. Alongside memory utilization, that's a little higher than I would like to have seen. We'll dig into that in a moment. And the internal flash DOM there that's got the storage. Alongside that, and again, we've had this rebooted with the firmware. Alongside that, we've got that USB drive as well that's pulling some data, and we can kind of enable or disable that. You can even surprisingly downgrade to a USB 2 protocol if you need to. I'm not sure who's going to do that, but still nonetheless, maybe from a power consumption stance, it's nice to have that configuration option. Again, you can modify connections. Again, you can set up a lot of that failover if you choose to. You can open up ports just like you could on a normal router. Alongside that, if you do set up the individual internet connections there, that's where you've got the options for that automated failover if you need. And again, if you're using the repeater, you can choose how you want to match or not match automatically with those existing Wi-Fi connections in your local environment. Again, third or first party there. Again, that ability to switch either of the physical ports from WAN to LAN is a nice little bonus there too. The managing of connected clients, again, fairly standard stuff. If we're going, we'll select this Pixel 8 Pro here. We can go in, view details about the connection, MAC address and more, and what profile it's utilizing. Alongside that, if you want to save or profile this device for future reference, you can go ahead, and if you choose to, let's go for one there, the Pixel 8 Pro, and we'll go for it, and then we can choose if we wish to modify that client and make sure we can name it for later on, as well as set a profile for it, so for that referencing later. Network management, again, for such a compact router is actually pretty darn impressive. The ability to port forward is something we would have expected anyway, although much like its predecessor, one of my criticisms I had was the way information is portrayed and any help. It has to be done via these additional docs. There isn't really enough information. There is a little bit of help and text along the way, but I know there are going to be users that would have liked to have seen a little bit more guidance with some of the configuration options. I know this is a relatively inexpensive router, but still, it would have been nice to see some of those helping options. They are there, but they're not quite as widespread as I'd like to have seen. As mentioned, when you are taking advantage of that failover option, this is where you can set a lot of that up. And again, you can configure it pretty darn deep there as well. Again, setting the priorities or load balancing there, of course, if you want to sort of divvy up connections one to the other, if you've got multiple connections. And again, those physical LAN identities there can all be set, configured, right the way down to DHCP and address registration if you want to make sure that certain IPs are locked in. And setting up individual gateways, you can set up multiple SSIDs here, is an option for you. And network mode, again, you can set the device up as a primary router, as an access point to an existing network, that extender. It's all, configuration options you've got there. And again, I will say, again, that for a travel router, this is pretty extensive options. And a lot of this is available via the mobile control as well. Also, much like the Beryl, it has network acceleration if you need. Just keep in mind it does remove some of the analytical features that you can use to kind of track what's going on in your wider network there. Again, all pretty much what we've seen before with managing the clients there. And of course, you can go ahead with Good Cloud, something you can integrate to manage multiple routers via that single panel interface. And of course, the integration of the VPN services alongside the physical button that's built onto the side of the device that will allow you to kind of, at the touch of a button, turn those on and off. And again, you can use your own existing subscription or free VPN service as you choose. There's a decent few options supported. You just need to add your own initialization, login information and more. There's plenty of options, and again, you can go ahead and get the VPN file from each of them one by one using their own tailored links. And once you've set up that VPN, you can go ahead with the physical button and set just exactly which VPN client you want to enable on the fly. And again, that means that you can enable that on the physical device, and it will then impact and encrypt the tunnel traffic of all of your connected client devices at a physical touch of a button. A lovely feature on the Beryl, and something I'm glad to see present here. And extending beyond that, something we've mentioned in previous reviews of GL.iNet products, you've got an app center. It's a bit basic, it feels a bit early noughties internet, but you can go ahead and take advantage of pre-made containerized plugins that can run from this system, some of which are already pre-configured. So if you do want to take advantage of AdGuard, you want to take advantage of Zero Tier, or even Tailscout for some of that VPN tunnel kind of larger network, you can integrate that into it very, very easily. Or you can go ahead and start browsing for one of the many plugins on this device. It will take advantage of the internal storage on this device, and you can add that USB storage, but there's a lot of flexibility there in what you can do on this mobile router, and a decent number of applications and services for you to take advantage of. Another neat little feature that was tucked in there is the fact that you can create some air gaps on this. Now you'd think with a travel router you just turn the thing on and off. Why on earth would you need air gap control? Well, I would say for extended periods of time, or those of you that are going to have this set up within a larger location of connected devices, you may want to enable or disable individual Wi-Fi frequencies as and when needed. Scheduled reboot on the system means that you can have the device on and off, or at least reboot to kind of empty the cache when you need, but also the fact that you can enable 5 GHz or 2.4 GHz across the two bands as and when you need them. And again, you can set that to the guest Wi-Fi as well. Interestingly though, you can also set a schedule to that multi-link output. So that idea that when you're bonding all of those simultaneous connections from a single client, you can enable or disable a lot of those features on a schedule. And circling back to that USB drive, of course, you've got the option for network storage there. So that is that connected USB drive now becomes network accessible with multiple protocols accepted. So as you can see, we can go ahead and use Samba. There's even a wizard there to help you set it up. So let's go through that wizard for the first time. So I'm going to go ahead and add ourselves a user. Let's add ourselves a password there. And you know what? Let's give ourselves a moody name. Let's go for it there. We're going to create this brand new shared user, and now they've got access to that shared folder. We've created our shared folder. We can give it a name, do read-write permissions if we choose, and then from there, go ahead and apply. And that means now we've got that additional storage that our connected users via this travel router could even utilize this as a logical targeted backup there. And now that's been added, why don't we go ahead and add this mapped network drive here. So let's go ahead and add ourselves a mapped network drive. Let's go ahead and give it a name. Let's call this one G for GL.iNet. We've added that connection. We're going to have to add those credentials that we just created. And boom, we've now got that connected USB drive there. So one thing I want to do now is do ourselves a little bit of a performance test. And our connection is up and running. We're writing onto the USB connected SSD, and we're seeing those performance numbers at 130 to 140 megabytes per second there. Again, not fully saturating the 2.5 gig, but it is arguable that we are dealing with quite a decent dense amount of data here in terms of what we're transferring over that 2.5 gig connection there. So what if we go for something a little easier? We go for just one solid 2.5 gig file, 10 gig file over 2.5 G. So let's scroll through and see. Let's go for this file here. This is 600 megabytes. So that's just over half a gig. Let's transfer that over, transfer that. And we're seeing, again, fairly consistent 137138. So is that really what we're looking at as a cap? Let's go in and find ourselves another big old file. Let's go for that one there. Let's go for something big. There we go. That's a just shy of 3 gigabyte file there. We'll transfer over Windows, Windows Samba even. So we can go ahead and transfer that over. And again, we're seeing that cap at 140, 150. Even though we are definitely connected on a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet connection there. So definitely internally, even though we're connected to that drive over USB 3, it would look like there is a cap at 130 to 140 megs with that connected drive there. Again, this is a USB SSD, the SK Hynix X31, so there's no limitations really there in terms of performance. Kind of surprised that the Samba connection there wasn't going a little higher over 2.5 gig. I'd expected it to get much closer to 200 meg, maybe 230, 240. But again, at least we've got that facility and feature here. I just wish it was just a little bit more optimized in terms of performance. Now, again, as mentioned, we've got those other protocols as well for DLNA for multimedia, WebDAV for remote access via the internet, and of course you can manage those shared folders and individual users. So again, when you've got a circle of users utilizing this travel router, you can use this as a connected drive for everyone. Just keep in mind that that transfers that we just performed seemingly indicated that, again, you're looking at capped performance to the USB of 130 to 140. We will investigate that further. And circling back to tethering, connecting an Android or iOS phone to this device via the USB port does mean you are going to miss out on the USB storage, of course, but it does mean you can attach your phone via tethering. It will be recognized by the device immediately. From there, you can enable it and then activate that tethering. And then from there, you can go ahead and start creating that failover support there. So if you do want to take advantage of having it so that you've got that internal Ethernet port connected in via that WAN connection, and you want to ensure that In the event of one of them failing over and you've got the USB, you can take advantage of that, of course. That does also allow you to load balance, as mentioned, across the two individual connections there, depending on the profile of what you are utilizing and how you want the system to react in the event of failover being required. Now, when it came to doing tests on iPerf, I had kind of good and bad news. As you can see, I was connected to the device at 2.8 gigabit thanks to that USB adapter. But I wasn't able to get much higher than about 2 to 2.1 gigabits per second there against the transfer. We're kind of capping out at that 230, 240 megabytes per second there. But overall, I'm kind of happy with what I'm seeing. It kind of gave you some idea about the extent of performance numbers that this device would likely be able to hit. Again, that's nothing to do with the overall bandwidth connection that's been afforded by the USB NIC that I'm using, or the combined 2.4 and 5 gigahertz connection that I have active on this device. But it's just, I get the impression that that's really as hard as it can hit. And if there was a 6 gigahertz connection on here, I'm not convinced the amount of power that's underneath the bonnet on this travel router would be able to fully saturate much beyond that. During the power consumption, I don't know if this is on screen right now, as I was performing these tests earlier on, I was able to see that the 7 watts that I was seeing with all of the connected devices, again with 2.5 gig, the 2.5 gig WAN, 3 simultaneous Wi-Fi 7 connections and a USB drive, went from 7.1 watts up to around 8.1 to 8.2 watts power consumption. So overall, not too shabby. And again, once you factor that in, that this is a USB connected device and it has remained well below 10 watts power consumption throughout the course of these tests, I am happy to say that the reported 7 to 8 watts power consumption by GL.iNet on the Slate 7 is still pretty darn good. I'm still feeling like these numbers are a little inconsistent, and the software does definitely feel like it's still in beta, as the firmware packet indicated, but I'm still quite happy with the iPerf numbers we're seeing here, and maybe is a little bit of a telltale as to why 6 gigahertz has not rolled out on day one on this device. Now, before we end things on this software, it's worth highlighting there is an advanced mode on this router. So if you know what you are doing, you've got network sysadmin level knowledge, I'd recommend checking this out. You will need to get root credentials, but once you get inside, this is where the good stuff lives. This is where you can really configure, tailor, and adapt this device to your needs. It's presented in a far more analytical fashion, but it allows you to really reconfigure a lot of what the system can do to your specific needs. And a lot of that is going to come down to that network protocol, that wireless network protocol, and also some of the applications and services you may be accessing on the device. So again, for example, these are the available SSIDs and connections on here, and it allows us to modify them quite substantially. So for example, here we have the main Wi-Fi connection there. We can edit a lot of this connectivity right the way down to the operational frequencies quite extensively. A lot of these options were available, but just not presented to the same level of configuration and adaptation. I guess the point I'm making is, out the box, this system does have a lot of configuration options already available at your disposal, but at the same time, I do think to really make the most of this hardware, there are configurations, options, and settings that you may wish to play with. The back end level of control and configuration, really, I cannot stress enough how much more there is to do in the back end here if you know what you are doing. Again, know what you're doing, but nonetheless, it does open the scope to what you can actually do on this device if you want to take the extra time to reconfigure a lot of the profile of the physical connections and indeed those Wi-Fi connections. For a lot of users that have been waiting for the Slate 7 to arrive, GL.iNet has been very transparent about what this device can and can't do from what I can see of the marketing materials. Very early doors did they highlight the lack of 6 gigahertz on this, so although it is a bind for many of us that it's not on there, we can't say that they didn't warn people, even in their early marketing materials. Additionally, everything else about the device delivers the 2.5 gigabit Ethernet WAN and LAN, the physical VPN button there, the Wi-Fi 7, 5 gigahertz performance numbers there, in excess of 2 gigabits per second for me during the iPerf testing was pretty darn good. There definitely felt like there was some bottlenecks with regard to that file transfer, and I don't know how much of that is to do with the way Samba is being handled on this, or it was just the fact that we were passing between different connections inside, so that might be bottlenecks that we can cover in our follow-up video. But I will say, at a launch price of $90 odd, I think it's $96, and the eventual price tag of $149, this is still pretty darn good value for a travel router. But keep in mind that much like the previous generation of devices in Wi-Fi 6 and 6E from GL.iNet, it would not surprise me if we see a deviation of this arriving with a SIM card slot, with a battery, much like the Puli AX, an aggressive router, but nonetheless still the best travel router I have ever used. And I'll link to that in the description so you can check it out if you don't know about it. But as for the Slate 7, I think it delivers on all of the promises they make. It is a modest, affordable, true Wi-Fi 7 travel router, and I know there are going to be people debating with me in the comments about the whole 6 gigahertz thing, but for me, I think it delivers. Let me know what you guys think in the description. Hopefully the written review will be live, if not now, then very soon, and it'll be linked in the description below. Let me know what you guys think. If you are interested in getting hold of one of these devices, and if you found this video helpful, make sure those two things are true, then please use the link in the description to take you to where you can get hold of it. And me and Eddie here at NAS Compares will get a small commission on any purchase that goes through those links. It allows us to keep doing what we do. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.